Hey, everybody. I'm here today with a very special podcast guest. In a short young life, this young adult has done so much and is a huge inspiration to me and is going to be an inspiration to everybody listening right now. So I want to welcome Talan Yorn to episode 572 of the Tick Bootcamp podcast. Talan, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me today, Matt. I'm Talan Yorn, an 18-year-old American Ninja Warrior competitor and Lyme disease advocate, and newly published author of Overcome, a Lyme Patient's Journey to American Ninja Warrior.
So, Talon, before we get deeper into the topic of all the cool things you've done recently, we want to talk about what life was like earlier on as a child, because you have a really interesting story there that's relatable to a lot of people. But can you just describe, because not everybody knows what an American Ninja Warrior means. Can you explain how cool that is and what goes into being an American Ninja Warrior?
Yeah, so American Ninja Warrior is an obstacle course racing sport. If you haven't seen it on TV, I would highly recommend checking it out. But it's basically there's competitors who are, trying to tackle all these, difficult obstacles and trying to make it to the end of the course without falling in the water. So it's a really unique. There's a lot of different components to it. It takes a lot of, upper body strength, agility, and just overall like mental fortitude because there's a lot of high pressure. So it takes a lot to step out there on the course.
And I think that's so meaningful because we're going to get to the end of this where we talk about your transformation and how much better you're doing now. But most people listening know that somebody suffering from chronic Lyme, we are we have really bad balance, we have really bad physical strength, we don't have muscle tone, and we're very exercise intolerant. So the fact that you got yourself to such peak fitness, both physically and mentally, to be an American Ninja Warrior is hope for everybody out there right now who's really in the throes of being sick. So let's discuss that. Let's go back to your Lyme experience. And, if you can start by telling us the congenital piece, because I know that's very interesting and something you learned later on in life that you were born with congenital Lyme, I believe, correct?
Yes, so I was born with Lyme disease congenitally. I contracted it from my mother. She had no idea. And for the first 7 years of my life, I was misdiagnosed, and doctors didn't know what was wrong with me. And my parents had no idea, and especially my mom. And there was, there was a lot of times where I was struggling to just walk at a young age, and my parents would have to push me around in a stroller, and I was like 5, which is not standard, but my mom didn't think anything of it, and we both had very similar symptoms, fatigue, fevers, we were constantly getting sick. I had joint pain, and doctors were just dismissing it as growing pains, which obviously that wasn't the case. And I wasn't diagnosed until my mom was finally tested by a Lyme literate doctor. And when she was diagnosed, she realized, wait, I might have it too. So that's when I was tested a few months later. And at the age of 7, I was diagnosed with Lyme disease.
Alan, do you remember life before you were diagnosed? I know it's hard to remember early memories, but what are your recollections of being sick prior to getting diagnosed?
So I would say that I remember it pretty clearly. I know that I would always see, other kids running around and they had all this extra energy, and I would always try to keep up, but something just felt a little off. Like something was different about me. Like sometimes, I would try to push and keep up with everyone, but I could slow down easier. And it was just like there was a lot of days where I just didn't feel right. Like there was something different about me, and I just had no idea what it was, which was a little bit scary with the, unknown factor because I was so young, and I was like, I was in constant pain, and I was fatigued, and I just didn't really know what was going on, and I didn't know any different either because this was from the day I was born. I had experienced these symptoms.
Yeah, and I think that makes it even harder to your point because, so for example, myself, I got sick later on in life in my early 20s, and I knew that that wasn't normal because I knew what it
Right.
was like to not be sick, but you were always this way. So you probably just thought this is what it's like to be a human being. Although I
Yes.
feel like my peers maybe are a little bit more, active and energetic, but we almost feel this way. So it probably wasn't a good barometer for you to be able to determine like how sick you were, right?
No, absolutely not. I really thought, because to me that was my normal, and I had never experienced anything different. So that was just how I pretty much viewed what it felt like to be human, which was tough.
Yeah. Let's talk more about congenital Lyme
Yeah.
because we're going to get to their roles in your journey in a little bit of the, later in this podcast. But there are plenty of people like Phyllis Bedford, the founder of Lyme Life Foundation, who are passionate about congenital Lyme, who have funded research. And there are definitive research studies out there that prove Lyme can be transmitted at birth from mother to child. But there still aren't enough research studies to back that up. So at the time when you were diagnosed, I mean, we're talking probably about 11 years ago,
Yeah,
was
about 11
congenital
years.
Lyme,
Yeah.
oh, 11 years ago, was congenital
Yeah.
Lyme broadly accepted by the medical community?
No, no, it was not accepted at the time. And honestly, we weren't really even sure if that was how I contracted it at first. It kind of took us a while to actually figure that out. But all of even like my mom's labs and mine were literally identical. Like all we had all of the same like things. It was crazy.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. What doctor did you use? What doctor did you and your mom both use? And do you recall what kind of tests that were used to diagnose you guys?
Yeah, so my doctor was Dr. Harris. At the time, it was Pacific Frontier Medical, but they've like transferred to Gordon Medical. But I don't really clearly remember the tests and early like stages of treatment that I went through. I know there's antibiotics, and that was kind of like what things started with. But like all of that is I wasn't really aware of like what exactly was happening at the time because I was so young.
Yeah. And so Dr. Stephen Harris is one of the original founders of ILADS, right? The International Lyme and
Yes.
Associated Disease Society. So he's like an OG expert in
Yep.
this field.
Yeah, he is. So he was like one of my first doctors to really, actually recognize our situation. Because the big thing that me and our family in general struggled with was being unseen. Like a lot of people, especially back then, didn't understand Lyme disease or know what it was, and you know even friends or family members who didn't really get it, they're like, oh well, he looks fine, and like he just needs to get outside and play, and it's not like that, and so that's why, I've been trying so hard to build more awareness around the disease and make sure that it's something that's way more recognized because, no one deserves to feel unseen that way.
Has your mom since shared with you what her diagnostic journey was like? Because it sounds like your mom was sick most of your life and it took her quite a while to get there. So do you have any insights or background you can share about that journey as well?
Yeah, so we aren't really sure when she contracted it. She was bit by, several ticks throughout her life, even at like a really young age, and she even thinks that maybe she contracted it around like 3 years old, possibly. We're not really sure, but she always had similar issues throughout her life. Like she had, learning disabilities. She, had just textbook Lyme symptoms. And throughout her life, she just had all these strange things, but she didn't think much of it until I was born. And once I was born, that was when everything went downhill. She wasn't able to work anymore. She got sick and she had to go on disability, and that it pretty much changed her life completely. And we think that, me being born is kind of what brought that on and really like activated that.
Yeah, and look, that's you wouldn't she wouldn't be the first. That's actually very common. We've heard that from other people on this podcast, and we've heard it from other people personally that we know in this community that during pregnancy they maybe were doing a little bit better and they were kind of up and down, but after the child was born, they were just really, really unwell, the worst they ever were. And that was, the worst part of their experience ever until they started getting a diagnosis and treatment. So it's not uncommon to go through that. But it sounds like even from then, it took her another 7 years to get
Even find
diagnosed
out. Yeah.
after you were born. So that must have been a very difficult part. Was she doctor hopping in that 7 year window? Do you know? Again, I know you were really
Yes.
young, but
Yeah.
she must have
I,
been
I I
bouncing
do
around.
remember it was from doctor to doctor, and she just kept getting all these random diagnoses like fibromyalgia, or they, like some doctors would even tell her that it was all in her head, which is I just can't even believe
Garbage. That's
that.
what that is. That's garbage. That's
Yeah,
that's just awful.
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, so how does she find Dr. Harris? Do you know that? Because like I said, he is a leader in the space. I'm just curious how she stumbled upon him.
I'm not really sure how we stumbled upon him. I know that he was one of the more local, like, Lyme literate doctors, because we were living in the Bay Area in California. So that was probably kind of how we stumbled upon him. I don't know the specifics there.
Okay. Do you know? So you mentioned that once you got diagnosed, you were young. You knew it was some antibiotics, but can you walk us through what you do remember, what you've learned from your family as far as the first steps during your treatment journey once you were diagnosed?
Yeah, so I do remember when I was first told, like by my parents, that I also had Lyme disease, which that was really scary for me because I had just found out recently that, my mom had it as well. And I had already seen her go through all the IV treatments and all the testing. So like seeing that really terrified me because I was like, am I gonna have to go through all of those same things as well? And at the time I was also getting a lot of testing, and I was terrified of needles, so that was like really hard for me, when I was little. Um, but yeah, going through that, it was we went through a bunch of different like protocols. I don't know specifically what they were, but I did start to slowly improve. So I was going through treatment for like around 3 years, like after I was diagnosed, and around 10 is when I started to see some improvement. And at the time, I also played baseball. That was like my everything. It was my favorite sport. I wanted to be a professional baseball player. That was like a dream of mine when I was a kid. And so I was starting to be able to, push myself more there and start to live a somewhat more normal life because my symptoms were starting to balance out. Um, and right around when I was 10, we actually moved to Oregon, and I was actually in complete remission for 6 months.
Wow. Now, I have several questions about this part of your journey. So, from 7 to 10, when you were doing treatment, you said by the time you were 10, you hit remission around the time you moved to Oregon. But were did you experience any herxes? And tell us what the worst symptoms were like, and describe a day in your experience that you remember that was one of the worst for context about how sick
Yeah.
you were and now how good you are. Fast forward to today.
Yes, absolutely. So I'd say the hardest days for me weren't even the physical pain. Like I'm sure you would hear this from a lot of Lyme patients. I would take the physical like pain any day over, all like the mental and neurological symptoms. Like there was a lot of days where, I would just like when I was younger, I used to have these. We found out later on that I actually had PANS.
Yeah.
Um, so I would have all of these crazy, almost like fits, like childlike fits, and even at the time, my parents didn't really understand why I was acting this way, but I just felt uncomfortable in my own skin, which was a really weird feeling. Like I couldn't even describe it at the time, but I just felt like uncomfortable in my own skin, and everything just felt so, overwhelming. And um, it was it was really hard to go through that, especially not even understanding what was going on with me. I knew that I was dealing with Lyme disease, but at the time, just not knowing all of, what comes like the details of what comes along with that it was it was really hard. So that was like what I really struggled with a lot when I was younger. And then also I could never sleep. Like for the first like majority of my life, I could never sleep. My mom would always have to drive me around in the car for hours at night, and I couldn't fall asleep. And then, I would even have like these night terrors where, I would like just it was it was really hard. So
So, in addition to the emotional and neurological brain symptoms, you also had insomnia, which are related to that as well. Obviously, right?
yeah.
There's a brain and hormone connection there. What were some of the physical symptoms you exhibited both prior and during your diagnosis into that window until the time you were 10 years old?
Right, yeah. So I'd say one of the big ones was I experienced like a lot of joint pain. Like sometimes it was so bad that I even struggled to walk, which is why in the earlier years of my life, I needed to, be pushed around in a stroller, or sometimes, I would need my parents to just carry me because I couldn't walk long distances. So it was like I kind of had a short window of actually being able to do certain things, and then I would just crash type of thing. So
Yeah.
that was um that was really tough. I also had, like constant headaches and um fevers. I was getting sick pretty often, vomiting. I would also get really just like lightheaded and dizzy. So there was a lot of, symptoms that were just kind of popping up, and I didn't know the thing about Lyme disease is really hard because there's a lot of days where it's like you you might get one thing and then the next it's completely different symptoms. So it was just kind of all over the place. And then there were some days where, I was okay. And then so it's just the big thing that was hard was I never knew what I was gonna get with it.
Yeah. Yeah, and let's talk more about PENS because that's a very common phenomena in children with Lyme disease. So adults like myself who get it when they're older, they generally don't have those severe PANS symptom expressions. And what's interesting, PANS is really the underpinning to PANS is an autoimmune brain inflammation condition
Right.
that causes these emotional and psychological problems as well as physical, like tics and things like that, like full body tics and shaking. So, and rage and emotional
Yes.
changes and things like that. So it's hard for adults to comprehend what that's like. So can you describe it in a little bit more detail what those
Yes.
symptoms were? Because I don't think we can contextualize that. So maybe like describe what a day in your life was like exhibiting really bad pan symptoms.
Right. So I would say with those symptoms, normally I would be completely okay. And then there would be a moment that there was always some sort of trigger for it. And it could be the smallest thing. Like the smallest thing would set me off. Let's say something just didn't go my way, or I was really upset about it. Like this could even happen. Let's say I had a baseball game and I didn't perform the way I wanted to, and I was really frustrated. I literally right afterwards at home would just break down completely, and I would just feel this like overwhelming rage. And it would get to the point where I would even forget why I was angry. It just felt like I was just angry at everything. And it was just like completely overwhelming. And I couldn't feel anything else. Or I almost felt like my brain was like shutting down. Like I couldn't think anything else other than just that anger towards, I don't even know what it was. I just felt like this overwhelming rage where I had to almost like throw myself around and just like I was literally rolling around on the ground crying, and this would last for hours too. And when I would finally come to, it almost felt like I didn't even like it was almost like I like blacked out during that time. It was like I was kind of aware of what was happening, but still it was like I didn't feel fully in control of my emotions and my body because like this feeling was just too overwhelming.
Yeah, thank you for being so vulnerable with that, Talon, because there are so many young children, I believe, that exhibit those same symptoms, and parents are desperate to find the root cause. And I think Lyme and tick-borne illness are the root cause of many, many
I agree.
undiagnosed cases like that. So, if anybody listening wants to share this, it stands for Pediatric Acute Onset Neuropsychiatric Syndrome for PANS. And many, many, many times, Lyme disease and tick-borne illnesses can be the underlying infectious trigger to PANS. So, it's something to be really, really be mindful of in the children population. So that's a really critical note there. So let's now talk about your fantastic 3 year overhaul, right? Because it
Yeah.
sounds like by the time you're 10, you're doing really well and you move and you're in remission.
Yes.
Now, I wonder, was there a correlation between the move and the symptom relief? Do you think it was the actual physical move and the change of environment, or was it the culmination of all the treatment that built up to it?
So at first we were kind of thinking that it was possibly the move, but then um we started to think that it was from, just the treatment, protocols that I'd been on over the years. But when I do remember specifically when I first moved to Oregon, I got really sick for the first few weeks that I was there. Um and when I was in Oregon, we started seeing a naturopath. And so we started doing some more like holistic, natural like treatments on me that were um a little what's the word? More,
Alternative,
yeah, alternative to some of because I've
functional
been on so
medicine.
many antibiotics. And um so we started trying these different things, and it was really it took a little while, but it was really helping me. I know it was a lot easier than the antibiotics and everything because of all the herxing. Like, on antibiotics I would there's a lot of times where the herxing just got really bad, and my mental state would just be a mess. um so yeah, so we started doing that for a little while, and that's when I started seeing some improvement overall in my health. It did take a little, so it wasn't immediately when we first moved to Oregon, but then over, I'd say the first like few months, I started getting better, and I was finally at a point where I almost didn't remember. what it felt like to be sick. And I would tell my mom that I don't even like she would tell me, that she wasn't feeling well or there's some sort of, symptom she was experiencing. And I would tell her like, I don't really know what you're talking about. Like, I don't
Wow.
know what that feels like. And it's a really crazy like thing to think about when I look back at it because I'm like, wow, I've been experiencing this my entire life. And then just those few months where I was in remission, I was like, wow, I don't know what this feels like anymore. And I was on a travel baseball team at the time. Like I was doing tournaments every weekend. And I remember it was even at the point where my parents would put like a backpack with all my gear and like my glove and my bat in the back of the car. And anytime we would see a field, I'd be like, I want to go practice. Like, can we stop there and go practice? And I was never able to do that before. And so I was starting to really live a normal life and I had more friends and I started to really experience what it felt like to have a childhood because I feel like Lyme disease really stole some of that from me. Um,
Yeah.
but that was pretty short-lived because the house we were living in had mold. So me and my
Yeah.
mom were exposed to mold. So unfortunately, it was very short-lived.
It's interesting you say that because I was going to ask you, do you think there was potentially minimal mold where you were living in California? And then when you left and went to Oregon, you had such a quick turnaround because you were removed from the mold. But it sounds like that wasn't the case. It sounds like that was just a culmination of all of the aggressive treatments you did with Dr. Harris. And
Yes,
then with your functional doctor in Oregon with the herbs, that was kind of like the icing on top of the cake to say, yep, we're in prime shape now. You're a healthy
absolutely.
10-year-old, and then
Yeah.
boom, you're in this moldy home and it's at your back, it sounds like.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. So I remember the moment really specifically too when my mom and I discovered it. It was actually on Thanksgiving, which is crazy. So we opened the closet and I needed like a binder so I could track like my progress in baseball. And we opened it and there was literally just like fur all over the wall and
Oh,
it was disgusting. So even after we had it remediated, it still didn't help. And from there, my health just started declining. I wasn't, I was struggling to keep up with baseball and I was starting to miss more days of school. And, on my baseball team, I was just declining. And it was very, also the team, because it was, a travel team was very like strict and they're, very militant. So they started seeing me declining and all the coaches just thought that I was being lazy when I
mm,
was, which was really tough too. So, because I was just trying my hardest just to show up and be there. So I stuck it out till the very end of the season, which because I made a commitment. I was like, no matter how I feel, I want to keep showing up, and so I did that. And by the end of the season, I was barely able to even really like hold the bat, which was awful
wow.
because I knew that I was capable of so much more when I'm healthier, but my body was just declining, and that was my final season of baseball.
I'm sorry. Did you and your parents share with your coaches, teachers, and friends that you were sick with Lyme disease?
Yeah, so yeah. So I once we shared it, with the coaches, they were a little more, understanding. And they understood that there's some days where like I just needed to sit on the bench, couldn't really play, but I wanted to be there. I did have some issues in school when I first moved to Oregon. I had some issues with some teachers that just didn't really understand what I was going through, and it was um it was really difficult too because I've also like in the early years of my life I was bullied a lot and I felt very like misunderstood and it was um
I'm
it was very
sorry.
isolating.
Yeah. Do you think that, because that's something I wanted to get into both, before your move to Oregon and after, what was it like as just from a social component? Were you being accepted by your friends and peers? Were they not understanding what a sick child or Lyme disease was and pushing back on you? Just give us a little bit of insight into what that was like
Yeah.
for you.
I would say I experienced a good amount of both. So one thing that, Lyme disease has really shown me too is like, who is really there. And even if they don't completely understand what you're going through, that they're still willing to, support you and recognize that there is something there and that, you are struggling with something. I mean, since I was so young, none of the kids like really got like what exactly it was, but there were some friends that I had that they never treated me any differently, and they still, were, there and just treated me like, anybody else, even though there were days where, I couldn't make it to a birthday party or things like that. Like there was friends that I had that understood that. But then I did get the complete opposite where there were, other kids who had no idea what was wrong with me, and they're just almost, labeled me as like, okay, there's something wrong with him, or he's weird because they
Yeah.
didn't know what was going on with me, and they just thought that, I was they could tell that I was different.
How were you in that regard? So I can speak for myself. Granted, as an adult who went through this, never mind a child, I can't even imagine. But as an adult, I wasn't a great communicator. I had a hard time sharing with even close friends when I was sick and telling them like I'm too sick to show up. And I would oftentimes have to cancel plans, and I wouldn't be clear about how sick I was and why. Oh, I have a headache, I can't make it. I didn't want to, I was ashamed and I was embarrassed and I didn't communicate well. Were you sharing with everybody in your life how sick you were and how you wanted to be there, but it was just very difficult and you really couldn't get out of the house that day?
Yeah, I would say that I did express that with people, and especially my parents. Like we did try to make that clear that like there was times that, I just couldn't be there because of how I was feeling. And there were times people didn't really get it. I know that one thing I did experience was there was, a church that we were really involved in, and as me and my mom started getting sicker, they kind of turned their backs on us because we weren't showing up to events, and so they just
I'm so
kind of
sorry.
wrote us off. And
When you need them the most, that yeah, that's I think to your point, Alan, when you're as sick as we are or were, that's when you know who your ride or dies are and who your real people are,
absolutely.
right? So that's the one positive, or one of the many positives that come out of a journey like this. Yeah. And now, what about when you were in Oregon? Did you have a similar experience where you were? I mean, now you're this normal, healthy child when you arrive. So people
Yeah.
think, oh, Talon is this young, healthy, active, great baseball player. A few months later, he's barely able to function and hold a bat. How did your friends and peers perceive that? Because they didn't know sick Talon
Yeah.
prior to that.
So I will say, in terms of, my peers on my team and everything, and I don't blame them for thinking this. They just thought that I stopped trying and that I didn't want to be there. So I started to get a little bit of backlash from them, and some of them would pick on me a little bit, or they were frustrated with the fact that to them I wasn't trying, and they would get frustrated with that. So even though I wanted to be there, honestly, in my opinion, I wanted to be there more than any of them. Like I was
Yeah.
fighting through every ounce of pain I was experiencing in my body just to show up that day. And I will say I struggled even more with the mental symptoms, knowing that, I felt like everyone was so misunderstanding of what I was going through, because I know that a lot of my teammates were like some of them were aware, but nobody just really understood. And that was a big thing that I struggled with throughout my life, was feeling misunderstood and just unseen by kids my age, adults. It just felt like there was almost this like barrier between me and everyone else because they just couldn't see and understand what I was going through. But I knew that like the people that would normally see that were, other Lyme patients, and they could understand and they can empathize with that. And one thing me and my mom have always said is you don't get it until you get it.
Yeah. Look, beautifully said. My way of sharing that when I was sick was I feel like an alien, but
Yes.
that's how I always used to explain it. But I'm telling you, what you just said, I'm going to turn into a sound clip for a little video, because that, I mean, that's the perfect way for somebody who's in the throes of it to share that clip you just said to explain, I want to be there more than anybody else there, but I literally cannot. Because
Yeah.
many times our friends and our family members perceive it as, we're blowing them off and they take it personal and they feel like we don't want to be there. But that's the furthest thing from the truth. So I really like the way you explain that, because I think that's a critical way. What we try to do in this podcast is provide tips and tricks to people through every phase of their journey. And for
Right.
me, I didn't handle communication very well. You did. And I think that's a very important piece. Even when you do communicate well, you still have people that aren't going to be as kind to you. But the fact that you did communicate well, I think helped it be less impactful from the standpoint of many people just thinking that, hey, this kid is, doesn't want to be around. He's being lazy, because they were able
Right.
to understand a little bit better. So I think
At
that's
least have
tip
some
number one.
idea.
Some idea, exactly, right? And then be able to communicate how sick you really are and how badly you want to be there and how badly you want to be quote unquote normal. Now, let's talk about the mold. You open up that cabinet, you see this giant thing of fuzzy mold. And did you know at the time how severe mold can be and how it can cause a relapse of something like Lyme disease?
I didn't, but I do remember like it hit me right away and I just felt like so sick. Like right after that I felt awful the rest of the day. I did know obviously I was aware of the fact that mold was not good, but I didn't quite realize that it could actually make me relapse. So that was something that I was kind of unaware of. I know that I could tell my mom was really worried about it, so that's when I was like, oh, this is not good. Um, so yeah, so from there, just everything started to decline to the point where um, in fifth grade, I wasn't really even able to go to school anymore. I was trying to go, and literally every single day, my mom had to pick me up. Like clockwork, it was always around the same time. She had to pick me up. So the school district actually had to send a teacher to my house every day just for pretty much an hour. And I was so sick that all we could really do was just like read. That was it. And I would just lay there on the couch, and I just could not do anything else. So it got so bad to the point where I became bedridden for 3 years.
Was your family dealing with the mold at the time, or were you now homebound in a mold infested home?
So at this time, we did as fast as we could. We did get out of that moldy house. So that was kind of one of we got out of that house, but we made the mistake of taking all of our belongings with us. So in a way, it did follow us.
Yep. Yeah. And so now the new house, did you guys have it tested for mold? Were you
Yes,
doing
we
any
had it
kind of,
tested, and it was also a brand new home. So like yeah, because we at first we were renting the previous home, and so we just bought a new house, and it was clean. We tested it, everything was good, but it was still I the damage had already been done, and
yep.
also we already still had all of our belongings that were sitting in that moldy house for months.
Yeah. And the mycotoxins are
Yes.
microscopic and they're all over everything,
Yeah.
especially things that are more soft, right?
Yeah.
Pillows,
Like.
things
Yep.
like that. Yep. So, I mean, are you still seeing Dr. Harris or are you solely working with your functional practitioner now at this time?
At this time, it was a bit of back and forth. So sometimes because all of our family is here in California, we would come down and visit and go to see Dr. Harris while still seeing the naturopath in Oregon. So it was kind of a back and forth, and we'd go down every few months. Um, and then I want to say it was around that time that I started doing IVIG treatments because we found out that my white blood cell count was like extremely low. It was really low, and my body was barely producing any white blood cells. So I had to start doing IVIG treatments every 3 weeks for 2 days.
So, can you describe what IVIG is? Actually, I'm watching on Netflix. I think it's called The Lost Ship, or I'm sorry, The Last Ship, and it's been around for years. And one of the things they just put on was there was an autoimmune complex from a potential vaccine for this pandemic causing virus in this weird show.
Yeah,
And they ended up giving all of the people IVIG, claiming it'll calm down the autoimmune reaction that's a result of the virus, right? So I know there's a
yeah.
lot of properties, but can you just explain to everybody listening what is IVIG and how can it be helpful for mold and Lyme disease?
So it can be really helpful. Yeah, so you're basically getting an infusion of pretty much. I want to say that it's almost like you're getting like an immune system from somebody else.
Yeah.
And so that was because I was pretty much wasn't producing white blood cells. So I couldn't fight all of the things that my body was dealing with, on the inside. Because it wasn't even just Lyme, it's all the other co-infections like,
Yeah.
Babesia, Bartonella, like all of the classic co-infections. I was dealing with all of those at the same time.
Did you
So,
did you have those as well at the time? Were you diagnosed with others?
um, are you saying like at this time? I was pretty much diagnosed with all of those when I
Oh,
was
you
diagnosed.
are.
Yeah.
So what were the other co-infections? You said it was Lyme, Babesia. What else?
Bartonella. I'm trying to. There's a long list.
Yeah,
Let's see. I want to say yeah, but I'll have to think about that. But
that's all
there's
good.
yeah, there's but there was a lot of other co-infections that I was dealing with as well. So the IVIG was definitely a game changer for me. And even at the time while I was still bedridden, it was still giving me just a little bit of an extra boost to like be able to function a little bit, even if it was just like being able to get out of bed or go out every once in a while. But still, I was pretty much homebound for those 3 years.
Yeah, my good one of my good friends that I met early on in this journey of Tick Boot Camp and has become her mentor, Ali Maresco. She did IVIG early on as well, and it was really helpful in her healing journey. Is one of the earlier things that she had done. So it stands for intravenous immunoglobulin, and it's basically a medicine made from pooled antibodies collected from thousands of healthy blood or plasma donors and given through a vein to support or modulate the immune system. So really, what it's doing is they're taking all these healthy immune cells from healthy patients. They're then going through and filtering, testing, and sterilizing it for medical use. And then they're putting it in you, the sick person, to help reset the abnormal immune response in a lot of these autoimmune responses from Lyme and co-infections to help your body have a fighting chance from an immune standpoint to eradicate the microbes, but also not overreact and cause inflammation and pain from overreacting and attacking healthy tissues as well, which is a balance. And when you're chronically ill from Lyme and co-infections, that's always a difficult balance because many of us have overactive immune systems that are killing some bad things, but also killing a lot of healthy cells as well. So I think that's why it's such a common treatment. And it sounds like for you though, was this 3 years in? So you moved when you were 10. It sounds like 3 years you were sort of bedbound. Were you 13 when you got the IVIG? Is that timing wise
No,
when
it
it occurred?
actually, I want to say that I want to say I started the IVIG around 11.
Okay.
Yeah. So I would say when around 11 is when I started the IVIG. Um, so I was doing that for a little while. And then we eventually, I want to say, how old was I? Oh, I think I was, yeah, okay, I was 12. So when I was 12, we decided to just moved back home from Oregon. So we moved all the way like as actually California was closing down because of the pandemic in 2020. We packed up, moved all of our things and just went back to California because all of our families there, yeah, and also our doctors and everything. So we just decided to make that move. I have talked about this a little bit in my book, but another thing that did um kind of catapult that whole moving situation was that my mom was reported to CPS, and it was by someone very very close to us.
So
Um,
sorry.
and it was really frustrating because at the time actually I had to stop all of my treatments while they were investigating. And it was just like they kept coming back for more and more, information, and it was crazy because they didn't believe us. They thought that my mom was, doing this to me, which is just terrible. And I know that there's a lot of other other families that deal with something similar to this, and it's terrible.
Wow, I'm really, yeah. And look, that's just awful and horrible. And I can share with you a story. We had another Lyme patient on this podcast who is the mother of a child born with Lyme, and she lived in Canada. And because she was treating her child with for Lyme disease, and some of her social circle and doctors felt that the treatment wasn't appropriate because they felt she should just be on a short course of doxycycline, they actually took her daughter away from her, and
Wow.
it was a really rough experience. And my co-host isn't here right now, Rich. He actually helped her from New York with her legal case, and she was able to get her child back because it was
Wow.
just, and he had to learn the Canadian legal system and had to help her, represent her to get her child back because it's so misunderstood. And
Yeah.
the people genuinely believed that she was mistreating her child, but she
Yeah.
wasn't. It's just a lack of understanding.
Yeah. It just lack of,
But
yeah.
but it doesn't mean it's any harder on the patients. You're already sick trying to fight for your health, and now you have people coming at you from all angles. So that's just
Yeah.
awful.
It really is. And I wrote about this in my book, Overcome. It was kind of in the middle of the book. I actually named the chapter Damaging Ignorance because that's really what it is.
Yeah. Wow. That is a brilliant title. You're a very creative person, I can tell. You have a good
Thank you.
creative mind. I mean, and you explain things very well. You're very clear in the way you explain things. I honestly have not read the book. I just found out over the weekend that you wrote the book in preparation of this. So I'm going to buy it and read it and definitely share it with others as well. And we'll put a link in the show notes, of course, of this
Yep.
podcast episode to the book and to all the other resources, and cool things you're doing, like the American Ninja Warrior. So, so did this case conclude right before the pandemic, and then when the case wrapped up, you moved back to California? Is that what happened?
So we actually it was pretty much as we were in the process of moving, we had to get an attorney. But as we, went through all of this, the case was finally closed as we were moving. So it was a really stressful situation. I dive a lot deeper into just the mental struggle of, going through that while being sick in my book. So there's like, a lot of really in-depth details of like what that, felt like. And I remember one thing I experienced at the time was that feeling of being, misunderstood. It just made me very angry. Like I was so frustrated. And what the worst part too was the fact that I felt like I didn't have a voice, especially at my age. It felt like no one would listen to what I had to say. And even though I was the person who was battling this disease, but no, it felt like no one wanted to listen to what I had to say.
Yeah. And yet they were interviewing you, I'm sure, as part of this, right? If this is a
Yeah.
CPS case, they're interviewing not only your parents, but you as a child to see what you're telling them, which must have
Right.
been very difficult for you as a sick child and just awful. So you move back to California, and now this case gets closed, and it sounds like it was dismissed, and they ruled in favor of you and your family, and you move
Yeah.
on and move back to California during the pandemic, right?
Right. That is
Okay.
exactly what happened. But unfortunately, that was not the end of it. We moved into two more moldy homes.
Oh my goodness.
So it got so bad to the point where, so I was doing online school at the time. I couldn't keep up with it. I was months behind. And, it was so bad. I remember when we were moving out of one of the homes that it was so bad that I literally, like, I fainted. Like, it was like, I was so dizzy because I also have POTS.
Yep.
So I was all of this combined, this mixture of, being exposed to mold and dealing with, the Lyme and the co-infections, it all was just kind of, bubbling up. And I just kept getting sicker to the point where I really couldn't do anything else. And during these 3 years, all I really like was capable of doing sometimes was like playing video games. That was the only way I had any interaction with some of my friends. Like I would play with some of my friends on video games, and that was pretty much all I had. Other than that, I, lost my whole social life, and I don't know, I felt like at the time that my, suffering, it was just kind of, meaningless, and I didn't understand why, I had to go through all of this.
What kind of treatments are you doing now that you're back in California? Are you back with Dr. Harris? Who are you treating with, and what treatments are you doing?
Yeah, so because of all the mold exposure, that was the big thing was just like the treating the mold, but the big struggle was us trying to get out of mold because it's hard to treat mold when you're still in it. So we finally moved out of those two homes, found a clean home. And what was really unfortunate with both of those was we were renting, so it was really hard to like, when you're just trying to find, a place, it's like it's hard to be able to like actually test.
Yeah.
So we bought a new home and we've, you know, I within days I actually started like slowly feeling better. Like I
Wow.
remember I actually was able to ride my bike outside and like I was, I actually felt great and it was just like a huge improvement. Um, overall. So at the time, I was mostly doing mold treatment while still being on the IVIG. Um, so that's kind of like right around there is when I, over the next few months started feeling a lot better just being out of the mold.
Wow.
So that was like a huge factor was just being, you know, in like a clean, safe home, and I could really start to improve. And I also noticed that the IVIG was starting to take more of an effect now that I was like in a safer, environment. And so from there, I was so I've always loved the show American Ninja Warrior. I saw it on TV when I was 7, And this was, I want to say this was after I was diagnosed as well. And I saw it on the TV. I was flipping the channels and I was looking for like the baseball game. And I found American Ninja Warrior. And then I stopped the TV there and I was like, I want to watch this. Like I saw this guy flying through the air doing all these crazy obstacles. And I was just like, I want to do that. And it was so cool to me seeing how like these, ordinary people like could just like tackle these like incredible obstacles, and it almost made me like wonder if if they could do that, that maybe I could overcome the obstacles in my life. So I just like absolutely loved American Ninja Warrior, and I remember telling my mom, I'm like, I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna be on that show one day, when I'm old enough. And I had a couple birthday parties at some Ninja Warrior gyms, but I was never able to really get like too into it just because of, my health. And then also I was mostly, focusing on baseball. Um, but once I was bedridden, I actually couldn't watch sports anymore because it just reminded me of what I couldn't do anymore. So as I was starting to improve, I was like, wait, I think I might want to actually try this. So we found a gym nearby that it was like a martial arts gym, and I started training like swords and stuff there because I always loved lightsabers because of Star Wars. So I was like, I got to learn how to use a sword. And I saw that they had all these like Ninja Warrior obstacles. I'm like, wait, I want to do that instead. So it was back in 2021 that I started training Ninja Warrior. It was definitely hard for me to get started because my body was pretty much, in atrophy. I had no muscle. I was, um, I was not very, I was not very agile. I struggled with, balance. And so that was really hard because I was pushing my body in every way possible doing these obstacles. And, it was a slow progression. Like, well, I would train and then I would be down for a few days, but it was improvement from where I was at before. So I was happy.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you were out of a moldy home, the IVIG was working more, and you're slowly now able to start training is fantastic. Now, when you said the mold treatment, do you know what kind of mold treatment you were doing? Just like categorization, were they binders? What was it that they
I'm
were
pretty
giving
sure
you?
it was binders.
Got it.
Yeah,
Got
so
it.
I'm pretty sure I was doing, binders, and kind of things along those lines.
Got it. Now, did you notice a change in your emotional state? Because we had a variety of specialists on around mold, one of them being Dr. Jill Carnahan, who was my absolute favorite in this topic. And she shared with us how various species of mold can cause a variety of emotional states, some causing anger, some causing depression, some causing anxiety, some causing OCD. All these neuropsychiatric traits are actually caused by various types of mold. And when detoxing the mold and removing the exposure, many people can then realize that those weren't the normal state of that person or their personality.
Right.
So I'm curious if you notice any of those types of observations as well.
Yes, yeah, actually now that you mentioned that, I did. Yeah, because so I also did have OCD during that time pretty bad. Like I've been able to, kind of manage it better as I've, gotten older, but before that combined with the pans, what would kind of activate, my episodes too was like I would obsess over one thing. Like I would obsess over something not being a certain way or, and then all of a sudden it would activate that. So it was, and I will say it was worse when I was in the mold. Like I felt like, and I also did struggle a lot with, depression and, anxiety and, I still struggled with my insomnia. Like most nights I just couldn't sleep. And
Yeah.
I would say that the mold definitely like amplified those things a lot.
So now you're training to be an American Ninja Warrior. You're slowly going to the gym, you're training, you're having some setbacks, but you're moving forward. Is it a pretty straightforward path from here as far as you're getting gradually better and better and better and better now that you're back in California post the pandemic and you're just making all these gains now being out of the mold?
Yeah, so I would say from there it was definitely up. I mean, but it was slow. It took time for me to really, get going and especially because I mean, I was not very strong when I first started, but I wasn't frustrated by that at all because I was just so thankful that I was able to even do Ninja Warrior. Like that was crazy to me that I could even do, some of the obstacles and that I was feeling well enough to even try. So already that was like a win for me. And I remember it was around like a month into my training, the um, American Ninja Warrior Junior, they actually opened an application. So I was gonna apply for that. So I applied for American Ninja Warrior Junior because I was like, okay, I want to see if I can like get on and compete. And around that time, I realized too that I didn't want to just do this for myself. I also wanted to use the platform and use Ninja Warrior to like inspire people and show them that they can overcome their obstacles like the ones I've overcome in my life. So that's kind of how I became the Lyme Ninja.
I love that. I love that so much. So tell us about, because I don't even, I'm not sure if everybody listening understands. You mentioned earlier that you were going to American Ninja Warrior gyms. So this is that popular of a thing where there are gyms that have these kind of setups to
Obstacles,
help
yeah.
you and obstacles to help you train in that specific niche sort of training environment for this program. So you're in a specific specialized gym with obstacles around this American Ninja Warrior competition, and you're basically preparing yourself to go and try to get in to be on television and be a part of this competition.
Yes, so that's exactly what I was doing. If you're trying to, it's kind of similar to if you're trying to get casted for, like a TV show or something. Like there's an application, and so I had to send in like a video and kind of share my story with them. But they didn't end up calling me. They were like interested in my story, but it just seemed like I didn't have enough experience at the time because I was literally 1 month of training in, so I didn't have a lot of experience in that realm, but I was like, I was okay with that. And I knew that, I had so much time to just improve and get better. And then I even started doing some like local competitions. That were smaller, like gyms, Ninja Warrior gyms actually host them. So like they'll set up courses and it can qualify you for different leagues and things like that. So I started doing a couple local competitions and um, I did notice like there were still a lot of things I struggled with like as an athlete just because of my health. Like my endurance was just it was really it was rough. Like, my endurance wasn't great, all of these things. But still I was like, I'm just gonna keep pushing and I know that like I'll be able to keep getting better.
Yeah. So it sounds like your journey in training was not that of a traditional training experience because it was so much harder and you had so many more obstacles because of your health and Lyme that it probably took you 10 times harder than anybody else to even get yourself in a place where you felt ready to do this, right? It
Yeah.
wasn't it wasn't a like I'm back, I'm healthy, I'm normal. This was you constantly pushing an uphill battle to get there. And as you're making progress, your health is improving as well. So you're getting more physically fit, you're becoming better prepared for American Ninja Warrior. And while you're doing that, you're continuing to treat the mold, treat with your
Yep.
functional doctor, and get a stronger immune system, and also get yourself more resilient from the standpoint of microbes as well. So it's kind of like
Yeah.
this parallel path you're taking.
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell us about the journey from all this training to actually getting accepted and getting onto
Yeah.
the show.
So that's I always love that question. So I had been training for about 3 years before I was they finally called me. So I'd been training, I'd competed around the country, and I had kind of really started to build up this platform, as the Lyme Ninja. And so, it really became like my sort of, niche thing where it was like I'm, kind of the ninja who advocates for Lyme disease. And, I started even working with the Center for Lyme to advocate to Congress and Senate for more funding. And so I was really trying to get more involved and just get it out there and let people know um, about Lyme disease. And actually, in 2024, I received a Limelight grant, so I received a Limelight grant, and that helped immensely with, my treatment. And I felt like it was kind of giving me the final push to get better. So I started doing all these different peptide shots and things like that, and it was starting to, give me more of that like um, you know, what am I? I'm trying to find the word.
No, no,
It
but
was
I think the peptides, I think many peptides, especially the common ones like BPC 157 for Lyme disease, are restorative. They help rebuild
yes,
muscles that were damaged from atrophy from being so sick. So you're killing it with your training regimen, and now you're taking peptides thanks to treatment grants from Limelight, which we'll get to in a second. And
Yes.
these peptides that are helping repair your damaged tissues and cells are now accelerating your ability to heal and pushing you even more further forward to being an American Ninja Warrior, which is great, right? But I'd be remiss if I didn't touch on the fact that your Center for Lyme Action, which is a great advocacy cause that helps raise awareness and advocate to federal Congress and Senate representatives to get funding for various Lyme initiatives. I mean, Bonnie Crater, the founder, and now Megan Bradshaw, who's running the show, are both have been on the podcast, and they're fantastic. So if people are listening, they can check out the show notes. There'll be links on there to Megan Bradshaw and Bonnie Crater and their interviews. But they're doing some great work getting, I mean, tremendous amount of funding to our community to do the studies we need, like congenital Lyme, to further solidify that that's fact, even though we know it, right? That's one piece. But then you touched on Limelight Foundation, which is Phyllis Bedford. She's the founder of that. And what they do is they provide grants, treatment grants to children with Lyme disease all across the nation. And they've saved so many people's lives. One of our first guests, Ashley Marba, her two children were recipients of the grant. And they are now in remission thanks to Phyllis and the Limelight Foundation. They would not have been otherwise. And she's a huge advocate of theirs, and she put them on our radar. We've had her on the podcast as well. I mean, Christina Kovacs, who is the person responsible for the Fashion Week featuring Lyme disease as the awareness disease of the year in 2025. She is a recipient of the Limelight Foundation. So not only are they saving people's lives, the recipients of those grants are now transforming the Lyme community in various ways. So you have Christina and Fashion Week, and now look at you and everything you're doing, right? So I mean, it's just cool, so cool from our perspective to see this sort of ripple effect of all the work Phyllis is doing. I mean, you were at her Dart for Art event, and you were the one of the speakers of the night, right? Recently.
Yes, yeah. Recently, back in March, I was the grant recipient guest speaker, which was just amazing experience being able to give back to Limelight after everything they did to support and help me. It was just amazing. And in 2024, it was actually right after I had received that grant. A few months later, I applied for American Ninja Warrior again. So this was my second time applying for the more like the adult show. Because the age limit was they lowered it to 15. So I applied when I was 15 and they didn't call me. When I was 16, I applied again to compete on the show. And in my video, I just shared my story and everything I'd been through, but also shared how I was planning on impacting others just with that and showing them that they could overcome their obstacles too. So I submitted that video and I just waited. And in August of 2024, they called me and told me that I was selected to compete on American Ninja Warrior. So that was just literally a dream come true, like a full circle moment. Just, after seeing it on TV as a kid and then getting that like phone call, and I was just like blown away.
I'm sure you were excited, but tell us, did you have mixed emotions like excitement, but anxiety and like, am I ready for this? Right? You must have been like experiencing all these emotional swings at the time.
Yeah, I was experiencing a lot of emotions. I know one thing that really prepared me for that moment was the fact that, I'd been training for so long and, I also had the opportunity I trained with a lot of, the ninjas I'd seen on the show when I was younger, like one of them being, like Sean Bryan, he's the Papal Ninja. And he was one that I'd always looked up to. And he's actually like, one of the owners of one of the gyms I train at. So being able to like train with people like that and kind of have like mentors like that really helped prepare me for moments like that, as well as the fact that I had competed by then. I would probably say I had done like 50 competitions.
Wow.
So I was like, I'd done
You
them
were
around the
ready.
country. I understood the nerves. Now I did know there was a different aspect of being on live TV, as opposed to, doing some competitions where it's just like live streamed but being on the big show. So I was a little nervous, but I felt really prepared. Like when I sent in that application, I almost like I almost knew, like I was like, this is the year that I'm getting on, and I feel like more prepared than, I've ever been to do this. So I was nervous, but if anything, I was just excited for the opportunity and I just couldn't wait to get out there and use that platform to share awareness about Lyme disease.
Yeah, but you were building your own platform. I mean, you were now the Lyme Ninja. You taught, and you were using that platform to raise awareness. You partnered with the Center for Lyme Action. You partnered with Limelight Foundation. I think you were also, involved in some other advocacy efforts as well. I mean, you were tied to Project Lyme recently as well. I think you were doing something
Yes.
with them. So you were all over the place, just helping raise awareness and using your niche, specialized, God-given skill to bring more attention to these Lyme groups that are raising funds to help everybody in the community.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's, kind of where I started to take the whole thing. I know it I was able to take it to the next level after competing on the show. So that, following month, September of 2024, we filmed for season 17 of American Ninja Warrior. And yeah, so I got to compete. It was just a dream come true. I made it all the way to the semifinals. I was really close. I was like a few spots away from making it to the national finals, which was just unbelievable. Um, and then, later on, they shared my story the next year in 2025 when they aired it. They, shared my story, and it was amazing seeing just the impact that it had on the Lyme community. Like I received so many emails and messages of people just telling me they had the same, story as me, or like they struggled the same way I had, and they felt like they could really relate to me. And I just them seeing me on their TV gave them hope. And I think that was the best part for me was the fact that me just stepping out onto that course, no matter how I did, that it was, it was having an impact and helping the Lyme community. And then from there, I was able to, now that I had been on the show, it was out there more and I started working, with more organizations. Like that's when I started working with Project Lyme. And they've recently become one of my sponsors. So they help sponsor me to, compete and get out there to build awareness, and now I'm also on their emerging leaders board as well.
Oh, congratulations. Are you going to be the gala this year?
I'm planning on it,
We're going
but
to be there, so I really hope you can
okay,
come and we get to meet you in person. There's a lot of
okay,
cool northeastern people up here in the tri-state area, so we'd love to see you. That'd be really, really,
good,
really
good,
cool.
good to know. I am competing in a Ninja Wear competition that weekend before the event. So, and it'll be like, it's over in Massachusetts. So I'm thinking
Oh,
about that. Maybe I'll just take a flight up there and
turn it
come
into a
to the
vacation,
gala.
man. Turn it into a vacation. Come
Yeah.
visit New York City and stay for a week. And man, it'll they're cool events and it's a cool place to be. So wow, what a story. I mean, I'm still just taking it all in because you took your journey. You were literally bedbound and getting read to for an hour a day while laying on the couch and couldn't function. And now here you are in peak physical fitness competing a couple of years later on national television, making it to the semifinals. And then they're sharing your story about Lyme disease and how you overcame it on national television and spreading it with countless people. And you're getting overwhelming feedback. I mean, that is the kind of awareness and advocacy that all of us want to bring to this world. So I can't thank you enough for turning your pain into purpose and letting Lyme be your driving force to raise awareness, because I mean it's desperately needed. And you're partnering with everybody. I mean, you're not just tied to Project Lyme, you're tied to Steel, the Center for Lyme Action. I think you're involved with iLads a little bit, right? I mean, the
Yes.
Limelight Foundation, even Global Lyme Alliance. I mean, you're partnering with everybody to help get awareness out there, which is absolutely fantastic. So tell us like what that felt like, right? I mean, just give us like just step back for a minute and tell us how that made you feel walking away and like just take like that really happened, you know?
Yeah, so just stepping back from just the whole experience of just, competing on the show and just seeing all this like amazing positive feedback that I've gotten, it's really incredible. And it's to me, it's very rewarding to just see the impact that my story has, had. And this is when I really realized that everything I had been through was not for nothing. And that, like you said earlier, like turning my pain into a purpose, and that's something that I've talked about a lot, is, that whole struggle is is what led me, to raising awareness for Lyme disease, because I would not be doing this if I hadn't gone through it myself. So the fact that, I'm able to now help other people who are struggling the same way as I have is just amazing. And I'm so grateful to just be able to support other people who are, struggling like me, because I know exactly how that feels, and I know how, isolating it can be.
Yeah, and people need to go buy your book, Overcome. So again, it's Overcome: A Lyme Patient's Journey to American Ninja, and there's so much more to your story, right? And I think that it's such an inspiration for people out there. The thing we hear most often is, "I can't get better. You don't understand. I'm so sick. Your guests are not as sick as I am. I have all these things wrong with me. I
Yeah.
live in mold. I have all these co-infections. You went through you had a child protective services investigation against you and your mother. You were exposed to mold at half a dozen homes. You had to travel from state to state. You lived through the pandemic while trying to treat. You had to navigate all these adversities, and yet you continued to push forward and you overcame it. And you were literally bedbound, being read to you for an hour a day on your couch at your worst with severe neurological, emotional, and physical pain crippling symptoms. And you got through it. So the message that I want to share with everybody is they can get better. People can get better. I don't care how sick you are. You need to keep trying and you can improve. And it may not be an easy journey, but you can get there. You just can't lose hope. And what better of a story than yours to share that message, Talon?
Absolutely. And I mean, one thing I always, like to tell people that is like, healing, it really isn't just, a straight line to getting better. Like there's so many ups and downs. And even now there's moments where, I'll compete and then I could be down for a week. You know what I mean? Like I'm doing so much better. Like I would say that I'm probably, 80 to 85% of the way there. But I still do have moments where it's like I'll push myself too hard and then my body does remind me that I'm not completely better yet. So I just want everyone to know that, healing, there's so many ups and downs to get there, but you can overcome those obstacles and you can get better. And I am proof of that.
Talon, there's so much more to your story, and we're gonna have to do more together if you're willing, because there's other
Absolutely.
areas I'd love to explore more deeply. I've had you on for well over an hour already, so I can't thank you enough, Talon, for joining our Tick Bootcamp podcast. You've been an absolute blessing and an inspiration to me and so many in our community. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm just so grateful that I can, share my story, and I really hope that it can impact others and just show all of you that you can overcome the obstacles in your lives. And one thing I do want to share with you is my motto is never give up, never back down, and never stop fighting.